All right, welcome everyone. We're just letting everybody in and getting settled, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to this edition of Webinar Wednesday. I'm Judy with the Travel Goods Association, and today we have quite the update for you. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. Please note that this session is being recorded, and the recording is going to be made available on the hub for replay when you need to reference it later. We have also reserved time for questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have something you'd like to ask, please make sure you drop it in the chat at any time, and we'll get to it at the very end. The 2026 show is coming quickly. Booth applications are still being accepted, and we recommend that you get in on this really soon. Badge registration is also open, so make sure you head over to travelgoods.org and save your spot. So now this is why we have all joined today. As many of you know, California's new textile recovery law, SB 707, was signed into law in September 2024, and it establishes the first textile EPR program in North America. This is vital for our industry because the law specifically covers products relevant to the TGA members, including luggage, backpacks, handbags, and other travel accessories. To help us navigate these changes, we're joined by the Textile Renewal Alliance, Textile Renewal Alliance, the TRA, and they are here to help us understand our obligations, the 2026 registration timeline, and how we can prepare for these new compliance requirements. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our presenters. We have Marissa Adler and Sydney Roth with TRA.
Thanks so much for that intro, Judy. And thanks again to TGA for inviting us to speak to your members about SB 707. I think maybe if we could jump ahead to the next two slides. Just before we get into content, a quick legal disclaimer. Marissa nor I are our lawyers, and this presentation is not intended to provide legal advice. TRA does not provide legal advice or recommendations, and this information is all meant to be information and educational only. Um, we encourage you to consult with your attorneys or in-house legal counsel for kind of further legal action on this. And if we could go to the next slide, just a quick overview of what we plan to talk about today. We'll start with just a quick overview of EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, EPR for textiles, and in California's program, SB 707, for those who may be unfamiliar. We'll also give you a little bit more information about Textile Renewal Alliance, who we are, how we were founded. And then we'll do a bit of a deeper dive on the producer definitions and obligations, which many TGA members may be considered obligated producers under this law. And we'll go into some specific considerations for TGA member companies based on what types of products you may produce. And then finally, we'll kind of overview the overall timeline and next steps in the SB 707 implementation process, as well as some recommendations for how you can stay engaged in this process and prepared for meeting obligations you may have. And then, of course, at the end, we will leave plenty of time for questions. So just to kick things off, we could advance one more slide. For those who may be unfamiliar, Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, is a policy approach that places responsibility for the financial and also sometimes operational management of a designated end-of-use product on producers instead of municipalities or taxpayers, where they may traditionally lie. Um, Producers in this case are usually defined within each law, but typically this is kind of speaking to the brand owners, not necessarily the manufacturers of the physical good. In the US, there are over 140 EPR laws across 35 states for various products, including electronics, paint, mattresses, packaging, and globally, these programs exist for a variety of products and have for decades. These programs usually require the producers to fund the collection as well as the cost of reuse, recycling, end-of-life management of covered products to divert those items from ending up in landfill or in the environment. California's textile EPR law, SB 707, specifically focuses on consumer-facing textiles, including apparel, footwear, home textiles, uniforms, and hospitality textiles, and especially prioritizes reuse, repair, and use of responsible end markets for those goods at end of life. If you can go to the next slide. So Judy mentioned some of this in her introduction, but SB 707 was signed into law in 2024. This establishes the first textile EPR program in North America. There are a few textile EPR programs in Europe, but by and large, this is a kind of a new area globally for EPR programs. SB 707 requires, and there are a few steps. So it requires the formation of a producer responsibility organization or a PRO. This organization should be created by the producers under the law. And producers are those entities that sell in or into California to fund the responsible end of life management of covered apparel and textile products. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into the producer definition and covered products in a few moments. But that compliance organization, the PRO, on behalf of producers, is responsible for developing and implementing what's called a program plan that meets the requirements of the law. And that plan outlines how the PRO, on behalf of producers, will implement uh, the program, including fee collection, contracts with haulers, all of the details and contracts necessary to facilitate an end of life management program for these covered products. So, to speak a little bit more specifically to the covered products under SB 707, this is not an exhaustive list, but SB 707 does specifically call out certain apparel and textile accessory products, including clothing, footwear, uniforms, backpacks, and handbags are also included under the law. And we'll put a link to SB 707 itself in the chat in a moment as well, where you can read the full list. SB 707 kind of uniquely does specify the products that are covered under the program. We could move to the next slide. And so then just kind of zooming a little bit back out on all of the different stakeholders in a textile EPR ecosystem and the role of producers, a pro, local government, and others. So starting kind of on the left here with the obligated producer, again, we'll speak to the specific definition under SB 707 for a producer in a moment, but this is the entity that is obligated under the program to pay fees to the pro that will fund the system and will ultimately be the ones taking responsibility for their products after consumer use. So those fees are paid to the selected PRO, Producer Responsibility Organization, which is a nonprofit compliance organization that kind of serves as the operational arm for the program. So they help producers comply with their obligations through collecting and managing fees and covered products according to the law. They also are are on the ground connecting with service providers to ensure the program operates smoothly. So service providers are also can be including local government are kind of the entities who are on the ground collecting, sorting, repairing, repurposing, recycling, managing covered products, and they'll usually report on those activities to the pro under contract to ensure that the pro is holistically managing the program. And all of this is done with oversight from the state agency. So in California, that's Cal Recycle. And they'll oversee the program. They'll write regulations to further clarify the requirements of the program and overall enforce the law, including approving program plans and monitoring the compliance both of the pro and of obligated producers. And then with that, I think I will turn it now over to Marissa to speak a little bit more about Textile Renewal Alliance.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you, first of all, to the Travel Goods Association and Josh and Judy and Kat for having us today. My name is Marissa Adler, and as my colleague and co-presenter Sydney discussed, we are part of a consulting team that's helping to set up the Textile Renewal Alliance. And you can go on. Oh, you're there already. The Textile Renewal Alliance is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization formed by the Cal Retailers Association, American Apparel and Footwear Association, and the National Retail Federation to support all producers in meeting their obligations under applicable U.S. extended producer responsibility laws for textiles. So we just submitted an application to Cal Recycle this past December 31st, 2025, so that we can be considered to become the official PRO, Producer Responsibility Organization in California. As a prospective PRO, Textile Renewal Alliance is dedicated to ensuring that the apparel and textiles that are generated in California are diverted from landfill and collected, repaired, reused, and recycled after use in compliance with California's, again, first in the nation EPR law for textiles, SB 707. You can go ahead to the next slide. So, Textile Renewal Alliance brings significant experience across retail and apparel, as well as relationships across the recovery value chain. And that combination is really critical to building a practical and cost-effective EPR system that can also then deliver very real results. Our team, again, led by AAFA, NRF, and CRA, and supported by consultants with PRO building and textile recovery experience, has developed, implemented, and operated producer responsibility and product stewardship programs in the past. So we're drawing on this experience, including in California. So we really feel that Textile Renewal Alliance is uniquely positioned to deliver results on textile EPR in California, specifically as a starting point. As producer-led organizations, we are grounded in the industry realities that exist, and we combine this on-the-ground stewardship and knowledge with direct experience designing sustainability, recovery, and compliance systems within brands as well. So with that comprehensive understanding of the textile recovery landscape from collection and reuse to recycling, system design, and operations, we are committed to collaboration across the recovery value chain to ensure that there is a successful program developed in California and beyond. So we do have a California-focused leadership. TRA is built specifically, as I mentioned, to deliver results in California for SB 707, the Responsible Textile Recovery Act, with leadership and governance designed around the realities of the California market specifically. Our producer-led board of directors not only represents the diversity of covered products in the market and producer sizes in the state, from very small to very large to brand owners to retailers and across the different types of covered products that Chelsea had reviewed. But that board of directors represent companies that have been doing business in California for a very long time and understand the nuances of the political landscape and how operations effectively work in California. In addition, TRA has established a California Implementation Working Group, which is made up of non-producer organizations in order to provide formal mechanisms to collaborate with those entities that are on the ground, working day in and day out on the collection, sorting, repair, reuse, recycling, and textile waste diversion in California. So we've got our board, which is our diverse producers. We've got this advisory group that we're calling the Implementation Working Group that's made up of those service providers. You can go ahead to the next slide. We've done a lot of prep work leading up to the point that we're at with having submitted our application. So starting in 2025, we focused on building the organization that is Textile Renewal Alliance. Our focus was building an organization that first and foremost fulfills the requirements of SB 707 and fulfills, in particular, the application requirements. So CalRecycle put out an application form, and it tied back to all the requirements in the statute. And so we put together an organization that responds to those requirements. And also focused on putting together an organization that's prepared for implementation if we are selected by Cal Recycle to hit the ground running as soon as that decision comes out. So that work included creating a comprehensive startup plan to guide activities from 2025 through 2030, which is program implementation, incorporating the organization and filing for our 501(c)(3) status because the statute requires it's a nonprofit, developing a very clear mission, vision, and operating principles, establishing that governance structure that I mentioned that balances the requirement for producer leadership with an interest in collaborating across the recovery value chain. So with that implementation working group, we also spent some time thinking about what the needs assessment is going to require. So we issued a request for information to over 275 individuals and organizations in order to inform the development of a request for proposals that will go out, if we're selected, to hire the consulting firm that will execute the needs assessment that is required by law. We also launched a website, newsletter, LinkedIn channel so that we can keep the California textile community informed of our activities and opportunities to engage with us. And we started laying the groundwork for that ongoing engagement and through participating Cal Recycle workshops and holding informational webinars like this, doing that RFI process, and having lots and lots of one-on-one conversations. All right, so let's talk about some of the nuts and bolts of the statute. So producer definitions and obligations. Like a lot of EPR laws, SB 707 has a tiered definition of producer, which allows for flexibility across the supply chain. The first tier producer is defined as a person who manufactures a covered product and owns or is the licensee of the brand or trademark. If no such person in the state exists to meet that first definition, the producer is the brand or trademark owner or the exclusive licensee if the owner is not in state. If no such person in the state, the producer is the importer of the covered product into the state for sale or distribution. And lastly, if no such person in the state, the producer is a distributor, retailer, or wholesaler who sells the product in or into the state. So eventually, the responsibility lands with somebody, and it also allows for some flexibility between the different types of entities in this cascading definition to work with each other to decide who's going to take ultimate responsibility and be that front-facing responsible party with the PRO. There's not that many exclusions under 707, but there are a couple. So the following entities are not considered producers under 707. If you are a seller that sells only secondhand covered products, you're not considered a producer. Or if you're a seller with less than $1 million in aggregate annual global turnover, then you're not subject to the producer definition. So what are your obligations as a producer? Under 707, obligated producers have to register with the selected PRO by July 1st, 2026. That's not that far away. Producers will be required to collect and report to the PRO data on covered products sold in or into California. And eventually, once the program starts, pay fees to the PRO upon approval of the program plan, which is anticipated to happen around July 1st, 2030. So the fees that producers are charged are going to be based on the amount and type of material of covered product placed onto the market and the cost to manage those covered products at end of life. The fee setting itself will occur following a deep assessment of the needs and capabilities of the current textile waste management system. That's that needs assessment I was referring to, as well as a determination of the full program cost, which is going to happen during the program planning process. So essentially, there's going to be a needs assessment process where they map everything that exists today in California around textile collection, and then they're going to put a plan together to identify how much more needs to be developed in order to meet the minimum requirements of the law. That total program cost is going to be allocated across producers based on how much product they're selling into the market, and could be offset with some potential modulated fees based on other criteria that we can discuss. Producers will also be required to meet minimum performance targets that will be established in the program plan and approved by CalRecycle. And what those performance targets are have not been established yet, but it could be things like minimum, some kind of sustainability attributes like minimum recycled content requirements, things like that. All right, considerations for Travel Goods Association members. So obligated producers, just remember, oh, sorry about that. I have the wrong notes on this slide. Okay, so considerations for producers under 707, the following apparel and textile items are specifically included. So backpacks, handbags, knitted and woven accessories, footwear. Hang on. Do you see the slide a little jumbled? Oh, or is that me? Footwear, jackets, coats, and vests, snow pants, and ski pants. Textile products not explicitly listed under the covered product definition in 707 are likely excluded from the law, but we are seeking additional clarification, and we will need to seek additional clarification of any unclear definitions through the rulemaking process. And personal protective equipment worn to protect from health or environmental hazards is explicitly exempt from the requirements of 707. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of questions about that, in particular to what kinds of products are covered under the law, explicitly or implicitly, as you go and start evaluating your product portfolios. And maybe you'll even have some questions for us today that maybe we'll be able to answer, but maybe not, because it might need more clarification as the rulemaking process unfolds. So a few considerations for manufacturers and suppliers. If you are manufacturing a product or if you're a supplier to an ultimate obligated producer as defined by the law, even if your company is not that obligated producer, you may need to provide product and material data to producers to prepare them for their reporting obligations. So for example, fiber composition, supply chain details, things like that, that the producer may be asked to report in order to comply with the requirements under 707. So you should be ready to share product information and respond to future producer requests to improve recyclability, reuse, repair, sort of those attributes I mentioned that could potentially influence higher or lower fees for that producer, and the potential to meet any future performance requirements that are placed on producers, which again will be set through by the PRO through the program planning process. There will be opportunities to participate in EPR program design and implementation, and that first opportunity for engagement is the needs assessment. The needs assessment can kick off as soon as a PRO is selected, and the PRO has 1 year to complete that entire needs assessment and submit its findings to CalRecycle to begin the program plan development. So with that, I am going to hand it back over to Sydney to wrap us up and then open it up for questions.
Thanks. If we could go just to the next slide. So we just threw a lot of information at you. And this slide maybe will help put some of it into just kind of a bit of a sequential context of what is happening when. So SB 707 it may seem like a long timeline between now and when the program will be fully implemented and producer fees are beginning in 2030 and 2031. But there are requirements and important steps in the process that are occurring this year and in between now and 2030. So as Marissa mentioned, CalRecycle will be selecting the pro by March 1st of this year, and then pretty quickly after that, obligated producers will need to register with that selected pro by July 1st of this year. Um, so the first obligation, and this is a statutory obligation for obligated producers, is to register with the pro by July 1st. So this is a really important deadline that will be coming up quite quickly. Also this year, CalRecycle will begin the informal rulemaking process, which will run through next year and then transform into formal rulemaking, which should be finalized in 2028. The rulemaking process will help clarify elements of the law that may be currently unclear, including definitions and requirements for the program. Also occurring from beginning this year, as Marissa mentioned, is the needs assessment. I won't be redundant with Marissa's explanation, but that will kick off upon pro selection in March of this year and is due to CalRecycle by March 1st of 2027. So another kind of quick turnaround time. After regulations are adopted in 2028, the program plan that the pro puts together will be developed and is due to CalRecycle for approval within a year of those regulations being adopted, so anticipated in 2029. And then that plan must be final and approved by CalRecycle by mid-2030, which is when producer fees will begin upon approval of that plan. And then within a year of that plan's approval, the program plan itself must be fully implemented. And then the performance standards that Marissa mentioned will start to kick in a little bit later in 2032. If we could go to the next slide. So depending on where you may fall in the value chain, there are some steps you can be taking now to prepare for your obligations ahead of when those deadlines kick in. So if you are a producer or you think you may be an obligated producer, now is the time to begin educating your internal staff on the compliance requirements and to be examining SB 707 to understand your obligations and if consult with legal counsel on if you believe you are a producer under the law. You can also begin assessing your internal data systems for data reporting. Reporting may seem far away, but we know that it takes time to develop the internal systems and coordinate internally on and with suppliers and manufacturers and partners to build a system that can facilitate collecting data and then easily reporting that data to the pro once those requirements begin to kick in. And I know I said this on the last slide, but I'll just reiterate because it is coming quicker than you may think. Producers must register with the selected pro by July 1st of 2026. If you are not a producer, you may be a service provider or suppliers or manufacturers. Now is also the time to start understanding your opportunities under SB 707, both under assessing your current infrastructure and service offerings in California, as well as where you may be able to support implementation of SB 707, the first opportunity of which will be participating in the needs assessment, which also will kick off in spring of 2026. And then for all stakeholders, no matter where you may fall in the value chain, we really encourage you to sign up both for our newsletter as well as CalRecycle's listserv, which we'll send links to those in the chat in a moment, to stay informed about what's going on when. CalRecycle has not currently announced any informal rulemaking meetings or workshops on SB 707 for this year yet. But signing up for our newsletter and the CalRecycle listserv will make sure that you're informed and part of that first group to know when those meetings are occurring, so you can stay informed on implementation developments and also ensure that you are taking advantage of opportunities to provide insights to CalRecycle and to the pro on implementation and rulemaking. And then finally, this is a competitive pro application process, and I think I might have seen a question about this in the chat, but we are asking for letters of support for application if you want to support TRA's selection as the pro by CalRecycle. Okay, and I think that's the end of our presentation portion, and we'll now turn to Q&A.
Oh, and sorry, I did notice that Chelsea Murtha from AAFA is on the line now, and so I wanted to just give her an opportunity to weigh in to anything that we may have presented so far, and also invite Chelsea to help answer any questions that might come up as we move into this portion.
Thanks, Marissa and Sydney. Happy to be here, help answer questions.
All right, guys, we do have a few in the chat already, so they're lined up for you. Diego asks for the EPR, we only need to pay pro for disposal of items we sell in California.
So the fees will be on the management of materials at the end, prioritizing the waste hierarchy. So reuse, repair, recycling, and ultimate disposal if none of those other options are available. But it is going to be based on products that are sold in California. So the program is going to manage covered products that are generated as waste in California.
Okay. Next one is from Anthony. It says, if selling nationwide on Amazon, including California, how is producer responsibility in California then determined?
There is a section of the statute that talks specifically about online marketplaces, and the role of our online marketplaces. If the question is more about like, will will Amazon take responsibility for it, or will the seller itself take responsibility for it? That is potentially a conversation that sellers need to have with Amazon if it's not clear. If the question is more about like how do we know what's ultimately sold in California, I think that that's a more of a data and reporting conversation. But the law does cover producers as long as the product is even offered for sale to customers in California. And
Yeah, Marissa, just to add, so the who is the producer can be kind of slid up and down the supply chain based on kind of your contracts, right? So if you're selling to Amazon or if you're selling through Amazon, right? But Amazon's the one that ultimately delivers it to the customer, and maybe you don't even know it goes to California. Um, then you need in your contract with Amazon to have worked out that they are the one reporting. If you don't have any information about the fact that your product is going to a jurisdiction with an EPR program, you need the people who do know where it goes to report. Or conversely, they need to share that information with you. What we've seen, and so that you can do the reporting. What we've seen in plastics and packaging is that often it's the case that the kind of end retailer is taking responsibility for reporting on the products, and then they are charging you back the pro fee plus some percentage for the convenience of having done the reporting for you. So, so that's just something to be kind of aware of, is what we've seen so far. And then on the marketplaces piece too, like if you are selling as like a third party seller on Amazon, so you're really just kind of using their website to connect with customers, but you're doing like the fulfillment and things like that. Amazon has to report on you to CalRecycle. So if you do a certain amount of sales to California and Amazon can see that through their platform, they will report you to CalRecycle. You still have an obligation to do all of your own reporting and whatnot, but it does mean that Amazon's also going to be giving CalRecycle a list of like, hey, here's all the people that sold covered products into California. And if you haven't done the reporting that you're going to need to, the pro and CalRecycle will come after you.
Yeah, I think you covered the next question I was going to go over, but I'll just read it in case I missed anything there. But Chelsea, I think you went over that. If we sell to larger entities like TJ Maxx and they distribute the goods, how would we determine the amount of goods distributed to California? Would we have to request this information from our customers, or does TJX be considered the obligated producer and we just need to supply the product info? Again, I think you just covered that. correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's not an automatic, like the law doesn't specify like it's definitely this person or definitely that person. Somebody has to take responsibility for it. You have to work it out contractually who's going to do that.
Another one says, how do we know what pros we can apply to? Is there a list or something, or do we have to research that?
Cal Recycle will select one single PRO for the first 5 years of the program. And so there will only be one PRO. There sign up for the Cal Recycle listserv, and that will be very clear who is selected. And they will make a decision by March 1st.
There's another comment from David. It says, for clarification, this is a general question, what to do with large accounts that use their own distribution. How do we know what's sold applies to any large retailer, Walmart, Target, off-price, etc.? Producers have no leverage to tell these accounts what to do, so this will need to be leveraged from the top down as a requirement. We don't have this kind of contractual conversations with most of these powerful retailers.
Yeah, I mean, that's like I said, what we're seeing in plastics and packaging is typically what's happening is that the retailer who knows where it is sold is doing the reporting, and then you just get charged back the fee by the retailer.
Those are all really great questions. I have one quick question. I know that like the list that goes over is kind of being figured out as we go along and those laws are getting detailed in. But I know that the products list covers stuff like backpacks and handbags. Obviously, a lot of our members do like hard shell suitcases and rolling duffels. Does that fall under those regulations as well, if anybody knows?
My response to that is that there is no further clarification or definition of any of those words that are listed in the covered product definition in statute. And so if there are any specific clarifications you feel are needed to make that more clear, then that will be a question that goes to CalRecycle during the regulatory development process, or maybe one that you need to discuss with your attorney about interpretation of the covered product definition.
Thanks for answering that one. I have another one. I know the slides mentioned an exemption for sellers that are less than like 1 million in annual global turnover, but does a company falling under that threshold still need to register to formally claim that exemption, or do they just not participate?
I don't believe you have any obligations under that threshold, but to be really clear, that is a global revenue threshold. That's not just a California revenue threshold. So if you make more than $1 million in global revenue and you sold one product into California, you are probably going to be obligated to register.
Awesome. And then I know the deadline is set for July 1st. When is that actual registration portal open, or is that open already?
So that's not open already. You can expect that once a pro is selected by CalRecycle, which should be by March 1st of this year, that there will be more information made available to obligated producers on how to register and then the process for registering.
Awesome.
I do see
Um,
another question
Go
in
ahead.
the the question is just, does this program apply to products produced from recycled materials, or if this is unknown at this time? It does apply to any covered product, regardless of what it's made of at this point. So the law, if it's a covered product that's listed in the definition and statute, it's subject to the requirements of the law. However, there will likely be some modulation of fees, so some bonus fees, malus fees, like increase or decrease in the per unit fees that a producer is charged based on some of the sustainability attributes that will be determined at some future date and time. And that could be, if it's made fully of recycled content, maybe they're paying a lower fee compared to a product that has no recycled content. But that's purely speculation as an example of how eco-modulation may work. But even if it is completely recycled content, made with recycled content, it still meets the definition of the covered product.
There's one more just came in. If retailers are doing the reporting, does the producer still need to register or is the retailer registering then?
So if you only sell to like wholesale accounts and you don't do any of your own individual sales into the state of California, and all of those wholesalers are registering and reporting on your products that they're selling, then you may not have an obligation to register. Um, but you would need to be sure that you're kind of fully covered there. So if you have a mix of wholesale and direct sales, you are probably going to need to register. You might not need to report on everything then. You just would report on your direct sales if again, if the wholesaler is doing the reporting. So I want to be really clear. I know this is frustrating for smaller companies. This is just the way that the EPR programs are set up, and there's nothing Marissa, Sydney, or I can do about it. But you need to be sure that somebody is reporting, and if even if the retailer is the one that knows that the product goes to California, you don't necessarily do that. If they are not doing the reporting, California, the state can come after both of you. So this is just really something to be having conversations with your wholesale accounts about now. Is how are they thinking this is going to work? What are they currently doing for plastics and packaging? So that you can start preparing. The other thing is that just because they're doing the reporting doesn't mean that there aren't obligations for you. Like, to do the reporting, they're going to need a lot of data from you about your product that you might not have provided previously. And so the actual act of reporting, honestly, is not the difficult part of this endeavor.
Might also just add on to that, that also when it comes time to be meeting performance targets and requirements, that is another kind of aspect that you will likely be, managing and have the control over for, making adjustments in your products, and then also sharing the data on those changes you might have made or materials that you're using to kind of show and demonstrate achieving performance targets or making progress towards targets. And then additionally, again, registration has not started yet, and it won't start until a pro is selected. And each pro will likely have a slightly different registration process. But just for speaking for Textile Renewal Alliance, that registration process um, is not when fees begin and when reporting begins. And so I think like we would encourage you to engage early and then to register, make sure you're getting access to information to make those obligations. And then as regulations are developed, as the program plan becomes clearer, as reporting requirements start to kick in, um, you can kind of, as you're determining with, wholesalers through contracts for responsibilities, can kind of determine how all of those different pieces are fit together. But registering is separate from reporting data, and even if you're not the one reporting, you may still need to register.
All right, one last question came in and then we can wrap it up from there. Do you have an example of costs or fees per item or what type of penalties will be applied if found not to be compliant?
So,
So we,
go ahead, Sydney.
maybe I'll start, Marissa, and you can add in. So there are not currently announced fees per item. Fees will be based on material and amount of product that's sold in or into California. Likely will be based on weight of the material in that item. The fees will be informed by the needs assessment as well as by producer data. And this is because in order to set kind of fair and accurate fees that will adequately cover the cost of the program, the pro needs to have an accurate sense of one, how much it will cost to manage materials. So how much does it cost to collect materials? How much does it cost to then transfer those for reuse, for repair, to recycle them? And then they also need to know how much material is in the market, how much material is being sold in or into California, um, and how the amount of each kind of covered product that's being that's covered under SB 707. And so all of that data will kind of come to light through the needs assessment process and the program planning process, which will then allow the pro to create what would be called a fee schedule, which will kind of specifically outline how much producers will pay for their covered products based on material type or covered product type.
And then just to add on enforcement, so the state of California can level penalties of up to $50,000 per day per violation for noncompliance. So, an individual violation would be a product non-reported, right? So, one product non-reported up to $50,000 per day that product isn't reported. So, the violation, the penalties for noncompliance can be quite severe.
All right, guys, thank you so much for all of the information you gave us, Chelsea, Sydney, Marissa. Um, that's a lot, and we really appreciate you keeping us updated along the way. Um, as I mentioned before we started, this is being recorded, so we'll be sure to send this out. It'll be available on the TGA Hub. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and we will try and get the answers for you. But have a great Wednesday, guys. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.